So, hey everyone, welcome to Mac TV. So, I am so excited to have a very special guest on the channel with us today. Her name is Miss Jennifer Brick. I hope you don't mind me calling you that, by the way. I don't know, it just feels right. But Jennifer is actually a career coach, which to me just sounds so boring in comparison to what you actually do. I love what you say, which is that you are a career catalyst because it truly does describe exactly what you do and how you show up and help your audience. And so I'm going to stop talking now and let you come on and take the mic and just kind of talk to my audience a little bit about what you do, kind of like how you got to where you are today and who you serve.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to get to talk to all of you today. So as Max said, I'm Jennifer, and my specialty, most people think of career coaching when they're just looking to find a job, and that's what a lot of career coaches do. But my specialty is really in career growth strategy. So it's helping you get to that next level in your career, getting that promotion, and also navigating issues that, arise at work. My degree is actually in criminology, so workplace deviance is kind of my thing. And my pathway to do this was actually, I worked in the tech industry for more than 12 years, and I had a really fast growth trajectory in my career. I went from an entry-level role to executive level in 3 years. And what ended up happening as I grew as a leader was I realized how much I really loved the people nurturing and the people career growth aspect of it.
Right.
And I really just wanted to focus on doing that full time. So I left my corporate gig to start my company and my coaching practice. So that's how I got here.
Well, I'm so glad that you got here because you do some amazing stuff. Your channel has the best videos. I mean, it always has me cracking up. I love how you talk everything about what you do. I just love it. I just love it. Anyway, so you are like on the channel today because I thought that you have such an array of knowledge and an experience in leadership. And I thought it would be great to have you here just to like have real talk about what it's like being in the role, because I just feel like it's important for my audience to hear from other people that have been in their position what it's really like, right? So that they don't feel so alone. Because it's so easy to feel like you're alone, right? When you're first starting out.
It's so easy, and it's such a massive transition because like most people, you're focused on being really good at what you do. And when you become a manager, it's making sure other people are good at what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is huge. And I know so many companies don't have adequate training for it. I actually, when I was first promoted into management, my company had a training, really great, but we were going through an acquisition and there was a travel hiatus, so I couldn't get to it. So I was left to my own devices to figure it out.
And how did that go?
It was definitely a rocky start.
Yeah, well, why don't you tell us about that then? Like, talk to us about kind of what your journey into management was like.
So I got promoted like most people do because I was really good at the actual job. I was overseeing a custom training services practice at a software company, and I was really good at that. I was really good at growing, and there was a lot of leadership things that I was good at. So they decided to make me the official manager. But I loved the strategy. I loved the business growth. I kind of liked all the nerdy analytics stuff that just came really natural to me. And I didn't really care about the people management part. I was just like, I'm smart, so you should just do what I tell you to. Right? This is how this works. Why are you doubting me? I'm really good. That's why I got promoted.
I love that. Thank you so much for your honesty.
In retrospect, I was really lucky because the manager that I reported up to, so my director at the time, he was a phenomenal leader. And he did give me good feedback. Like he knew that I didn't have the leadership training that people that were sitting at HQ were still getting, but he wasn't sitting there either. And he gave me really great advice, was to actually think about who I wanted to be as a leader. And did I want to be did I want to be the manager that people were going home to complain about? And the answer was definitely no. I didn't want to be the bad boss ruining people's day. No one wants to be that person, even if you accidentally are. So he really encouraged me to think about like who I wanted to be as a leader and define things like leadership principles that I was going to be living by and how I would show up for the team every day.
I love that. I love that. I love that you had someone that you could rely on to talk to or who just like called you out on it too. Cause I don't think a lot of us have that in our midst, right? So
I
that's
think I was really lucky because he was a great leader and his leader was another great leader who reported to another great leader. And
got
I think that that's rare. Like I've worked for a lot of great managers, but I do think that finding great leaders is rare. And to actually have one that you're reporting to directly that like can give you mentorship
yeah.
is it's a luxury. Most people don't have that because typically your manager probably doesn't really know how to lead either. And leadership and management are two totally different things.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe you kind of already answered this, but what was the hardest part of management for you?
It, it was making that shift to, the thing that I was really encouraged to do was like inspiring people to do things as opposed to
Mm,
just like, okay, this is what we're doing.
yeah.
Because I was good at knowing what the task was, but I wasn't good at guiding people into terms of making decisions. Like I tend to be very straightforward, which was also another thing which I can come back to. But I was very like, again, it was very binary and it was very obvious to me. And obviously, like, I also wasn't really aware of the fact that not everyone knew the things that I did. Like, I knew it, but I didn't really understand that there was also that gap and that I could be of immense help to the team to help them, you know, gain the knowledge that I had and to knowledge share as much as possible and to be there as their mentor. And also to encourage them to pursue kind of their own awesomeness as well, because they were bringing things to the table that I definitely wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Different pieces of the puzzle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Awesome.
and then also like I've been called abrasive a few times and I think it's something that I continued to be called because I think ultimately like I'm very straightforward and I'm not necessarily the best at sugarcoating. And that was another huge shift for me was like because I like to get direct feedback and I love like I would rather hear how I can grow versus what I'm doing good at. And
Mm,
I assumed everyone was like that as well
yeah.
and they're not. So, there was also like there was that learning curve of like instead of just telling people what they didn't do so good and what they need to be better on was also like, doing things like giving praise and also making sure that I was delivering feedback in a way that people could actually receive without triggering, defensiveness or making them feel bad about themselves, which was obviously like never the intention. But, you know, byproduct of when you don't know how to actually deliver feedback effectively.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what's the craziest experience you would say like that you've ever had as a manager? Because I feel like we've all had these crazy stuff happen to us.
Okay, so this one's gonna the craziest. I had one person that reported to me at one position, and it was a very problematic employee, say this
Oh,
delicately. So there was a lot of kind of just like rule infractions, which eventually led up to harassment claims
oh my,
that I had to intake. And as a new manager, like I was still a new manager and receiving a claim of sexual harassment, I had been through the training and I had no idea how to respond and how to actually navigate that process. I was also in a global role where I was having to travel on a very consistent basis and wasn't in the same location when things were being dealt with. So that was a really hard thing. And there was a lot of instability that generated on the team as well. Because
yeah.
I did have the good fortune of having, like, although we were geographically dispersed, my team was really close.
Mm.
And that was a big, like, that was a trial by fire kind of situation where, like, I had to, like, figure out how to do things, like, from legal perspectives, from HR perspectives, but also just from, like, human perspectives to make sure that, like, there wasn't like damage to the team and that people felt safe and like that we were able to contain some of the bad precedents that might have been set, not sexual harassment wise, but in some other regards. So that was actually really a challenge to navigate.
What do you think was the one thing that really like helped you and your team get through that challenge?
I think transparency
Mm,
really came down to it. I was fortunate because the company that I was at did allow me to share more about the circumstance than what some other companies might actually allow, especially in such challenging circumstances. Because often, like, if you have an employee who reports sexual harassment or discrimination to you, you can't necessarily tell them the results of what happened through the investigation and stuff because
right.
confidentiality and it's different in every single location and stuff like this, like, and especially when you're dealing with globally dispersed teams. But I was fortunate because the company I was at really advocated and supported a lot of transparency. And I think the more information that you can, and not to say that we were like breaching confidence or privacy at all, but being able to give them enough information that they understood that it wasn't, that all of a sudden a team member disappeared and it was completely unfair and like, because they can say whatever they want as they're going out the door, but you're as a manager limited. So I was happy that I was able to have that transparency. And it was also able to show, some of my team members as well that like how important that safety was for the company as well. Cause that was my biggest concern going into it was that there would just be that insecurity.
Yeah. Yeah, which makes sense. I love that. I think one of the most important things is transparency, to be honest with you. I feel like we need to have a lot more of that. I always say on the channel, like if you don't give people enough of the pieces of the puzzle, they'll try and put it together themselves. And it is almost always
It's
not
different puzzle.
exactly.
They're like somewhere over
Almost
there.
always. So
Well, and I find like drawing from the puzzle analogy as well, like if they're putting together the puzzle, they're probably going to put together a 25 piece when really what you're dealing with as a manager is a 2000 piece
exactly.
puzzle.
Exactly.
And especially as you ascend as a leader, it becomes more and more complex each step that you go up the ladder as well.
Yeah, that's so true. So, I think you're like also super fortunate for the fact that the company was good with you allow like giving some transparency because some
Absolutely.
companies are just they do not subscribe to that method at all.
I've worked at those
I
companies as well.
unfortunately work for a company like that. They said that they prescribe to transparency, but they were not. They were the
Everyone
opposite.
says they're transparent.
Yeah,
It's very trendy to be
it's
transparent, but
trendy. Exactly.
it transparency requires a very high level of trust at every single level.
Yeah.
And if that trust is not there at any point in the structure, it corrodes trust across, which makes transparency impossible.
Possible. Exactly.
So, and I mean, there's a lot of vulnerability that goes with that. And that's not necessarily what, successful organizations are known for. They want to be transparent, but they don't want to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
They want to mitigate the risk. And so they have to reconcile what those two things are and, the risk that lies within each side of that spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. But you're absolutely right when you say it's kind of like trendy. I remember it was like super trendy with that book. I can't remember what book it's called now, but oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to come back to it. But there was a book that came out a couple years ago, Radical Candor.
Radical candor. Yeah.
Yes. When that book came out, it was like every company was like, "Oh, I'm transparent. I'm transparent." I was like, "Transparent."
Everyone's like updating their company site and their values. Like, we're transparent. Yeah. Yeah.
But not at all.
And then you get inside and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what transparency is? Do you really?
Exactly, exactly. So I think that's awesome that your company subscribed to that. So switching gears here for a second. So a lot of like my clients and even like my subscribers, they suffer from imposter syndrome, like quite a bit, which I think is totally normal, especially when you're first starting out as a new manager.
Yeah.
For you, did you have any, bouts of imposter syndrome, and was there anything like that you did to kind of keep moving forward, even though you felt that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came into leadership, I was working at Salesforce, which is biggest SaaS company in the world.
Love it.
And I came in through an acquisition. So
Mhm.
like I didn't come through, the hardcore Salesforce hiring. I snuck myself in there. So there I
Perfectly.
was. And I'm working at this massive tech company. I have like my little bachelor in criminology degree from a school that most people in New York or in the United States have never heard of. It's Canadian University. And I was hiring like everyone that I hired had an MBA, an MA, or a PhD.
Mm,
So, and like I think that's one of the things of like that creates when you're working with people, and especially when there's people that you're thinking about hiring that are so educated and so smart, that triggers a lot. It's like, okay, like me and my little criminology degree, like, is anyone going to take me seriously? Like, am I in the right place here? Absolutely. Like, and there was a couple of things that really helped me because the first thing was just taking like an analytic lens to it was sure my degree was in criminology and I didn't have a fancy schmancy PhD degree from an Ivy League education. But what I did have was I invested a lot into my professional growth and making sure that I knew more than anyone in that area. Like I was the most successful person at doing this function at most companies. And that was something I always made sure that I was doing my best to be the top of my game.
right.
And I was in a niche industry that most people didn't know. And obviously, when someone's coming in and working for me, they don't have that level of experience because they're not coming in as a manager as well. They're coming in earlier in their career. And I do know that there's still things that I can learn from them, just like how they can learn from me.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I can learn. I think one of the biggest misconceptions, especially when you become a manager, is that it's like, okay, like I'm responsible for teaching, I'm not responsible for learning, but like it's a bi-directional relationship. If you're in a good relationship with your employees, you're learning from them just as much as they're learning from you because you guys each have different strengths. And if you don't have different strengths, the composition of your team is off balance. The other thing that also really helped me was just like my husband works at one of the top companies, like top tech companies. And I know like he's open, like he's like, why are they hiring me? Like, why am I still here? Don't they know that I don't know anything? So like I've had enough conversations and like this was something that I spoke to a lot of people about if they felt like they were worthy of being in the room and stuff like that. And it was something that I think even when you listen to leaders in very high levels, it'll sneak up in conversations and you can acknowledge that everyone feels that, and what actually underlies it is that you want to be really good at what you do.
Yeah.
And that the
Yeah.
imposter syndrome is actually because you care about what you do and that you care about adding value and being in the right place. So it's actually like it can be a great motivator as well to continue to do that and to stay at the top of your game.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I think I totally agree with everything that you said. And also for me, one of the things that I did too was like make sure that I was constantly learning. That's kind of like what you said, right? Like you really threw yourself into professional development, and I think that that really helps counteract like those negative like imposter syndrome feelings that you're having, right? And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
for you, like what did you do specifically to improve upon your like leadership and management skills? Like I know you obviously had a mentor, but was there anything else that you did specifically?
So getting like groups of mentors, like I was blessed with the mentors that I collected over the course of my career because I had really good people to look up to. And I think like the first thing that I did was I looked to the leaders that I had worked with or worked, had exposure to, and I looked at what I really liked about their leadership. So that
Mm,
was the first thing that I did. And like who do I want to be more like and in what ways do I want to be like them? Because you don't want to like be a carbon copy of someone. Like that's not you, then you're just trying to be them. What you're trying to do is be yourself. So I took a look at what I really appreciated, and what I ended up coming up with was my 3 leadership principles that I still basically live and die by. I use in my approach to leadership. And when I select a leader that I will be working for, it was also a lens that I used. That was super helpful. And it allowed me to have a framework. Like I work really well in frameworks. I'm one of those people.
me too.
So it allowed me like in any approach or any conversation to like ask the question. And I was also open with my team about what those principles were so that they could hold me to them. So if I was offending one of my own principles or they felt like I was offending one of my own principles, they could bring that to me so that I
Mhm.
can course correct because there was no point in having them if they didn't actually translate into the real world.
Exactly. Exactly. So what were your, if you don't mind me asking, what were your
Oh yeah, no,
recommendations?
I'm super open about these. So the first one was that I my first thing was that I need to help people grow.
Mm,
Like I come from training, so this is very natural. It didn't always have to be I could teach you something directly. It could be making sure that I was getting my team the right professional growth opportunities, assigning them to stretch projects, connecting them with webinars that would help them with something that they're working on, recommending books, like connecting them with other people in the organization. Like there was so many different ways of doing it depending on what they were actually trying to do. The second thing that I thought was absolutely my job was removing obstacles. Not
oh,
to say that
yes.
I wanted them to be the first person, like I didn't want them to run to me every time there was a little tiny bit of friction. But ultimately, sometimes it was easier for me to come in and to help them out and to move something. Like I expect the same from my leadership when it's necessary. There's no point in unnecessary struggle when you can simply put your hand up, ask for help, and then it didn't always mean that I was injecting myself into a conversation or anything like that. Often it was just, okay, let's talk about this and figure out how you can get over, under, around, or through this.
Hmm.
And if I need to help, cool, but like you could probably do this on your own. So it was like, it was really coaching. And then the third thing that was crucial to me was staying out of their way. I
Mm,
never wanted to, I think like having a high level of autonomy is something that I always personally treasured and I thought was really important for my teams because I think that in order to thrive, you need to have the space to do it. And I really wanted to see my team growing. Now, autonomy is different things to different people. So,
yeah.
like, understanding that in my team was really important. But I never wanted someone to feel like they were being micromanaged. And I had team members call me out when I was overstepping my boundaries. And there were some things that were just really important that I needed to be more involved with, or I felt like I had to be more involved with due to visibility and making sure that things were successful. But I would also try to be open about when I knew it was happening versus when like they're like, okay, you know what? Just ease back. Because ultimately my job as a manager isn't supervising their work.
Right.
It's making sure that they have the right setup in order for them to succeed and that they have the right tools. And if I'm doing the first two things right, number three is a breeze.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, I love that. We are so much more similar than I thought. This is like the first time we've had this conversation. So
I can't believe
very,
that we actually have not spoken about this
yeah,
before.
we've never. It's like, oh my goodness, that's mine. That's mine too. Like I thought the second one. You know how you were talking about removing the obstacles. To
Yeah.
me, it's like the roadrunner effect. That's what I have always thought
Ooh,
about. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. I love those eyes.
You say it like so much more elegantly than I do.
No, but I'm serious. That is like literally what I used to feel like really live by is like I am going to be your roadrunner. And just like you said, it's not like that I want you to run to me with every last thing. But
Yeah.
I know that you know what you're doing good enough to like if you're coming to me, then it's probably because you really do need the obstacle removed. And that's
Yeah.
my cue to be that roadrunner and just like plow down the way. So I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like really weird that we've never had that conversation before.
I
But
know.
anyways, that's okay that we can have it here.
Good thing we're talking now.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say then? Because you also like developed managers and stuff too. So what would you say is like a really important skill for a brand new manager to start working at and developing?
I think the most important thing is accountability.
Ooh, I like that. Expand.
So going into like, I think the first thing that you need to know is like, it also ties into like a level of self-awareness of like at any point in your career there's going to be things that you're good at and not so good at, and being honest with yourself about what those things are is really important. But then also taking on that accountability to be great at the things that you're good at, to make sure that the things that you're not so good at aren't getting in your way, and that you're being accountable to your team to provide the leadership that they really deserve. Like they're there and you're their manager. Like they really deserve to be getting the best from you and to be getting the leadership that they need, but also obviously like accountability towards the business. I sincerely believe that if we're not accountable, we cannot grow. And
Yeah.
if you're not able to see the things that are good and the things that are bad, you don't have any ability to actually expand on anything. You'll just kind of stay in that same place. And especially when you first step into that role as a manager, like if I think about like if I never changed from when I first like became promoted to be an official manager, if I stayed there, like I wouldn't have continued growing in my career because I wouldn't have been a good manager. I would have been the headache. Sure, some of my team still like me. That's cool. But I don't think that I don't think that my function would have been successful because I think overall people wouldn't have been empowered the way that they deserve to be and that I wanted them to be. And that really makes a team thrive.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That little nugget's gonna like go into my next my next mini training for sure. I love that. Yeah, that's really good. So I think it was like a couple weeks ago I did a YouTube video about, why managers fail. And you commented on it and that you were kind of like surprised of that stat. That's like 60% of new managers fail within their first 2 years, which is like crazy.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, like, anyways, yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And I think they were saying like the number one reason is because there is, this lack of training, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But to me, it's crazy. So I want your thoughts on this, because to me, it is crazy to think that such an important role, like frontline managers, middle managers, they are connected to the customer, they're connected to the business, to the people, like they are the linchpin of so much. It's crazy to me that a company would not invest in their training. Why do you think that is? I'm just like curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
So I think every company has its own leadership culture. And
Mm.
this really is something that has to start at the top. So if you look towards the C suite and in particular the CEO, if growth and actual leadership, not management, not oversight, is something that's important to them, you will see that trickle down across the organization. When it's not, you see that as well. I also think, coming from the training world, that we people don't know what training is actually needed and what is sufficient and what isn't sufficient. So I think like probably when you're a new manager, there's going to be like the legally obligated training so that that sexual harassment exists and where the fire escape is, like whatever it is, you'll have like the basics. But I think most companies, they have the values on the wall, but they don't live by them, like we talked about with transparency. So that's like a big thing, because as a leader, if you don't know what values your company really wants to cultivate, you don't know what to cultivate either.
Yeah.
And then also like there's just kind of there's a lot of I think that there's also like a cookie cutter approach to leadership. And I wouldn't even necessarily call it leadership. I would call it management. But it's that kind of just stereotypical, like imposing, like it was the first thing that I did. I'll tell you what to do and you'll do it. Right.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So I think like we train managers, we don't train leaders. And those are like, I think training a leader and cultivating leadership is a much more substantial investment in terms of time, money, and energy.
Yeah.
And often organizations don't have that competency within, because I think like it's not just a matter of going to a training class and like spending a week and you come out and you're a leader. Congratulations, you get a crown. It takes so much more time than that. And it's something that you need to continue developing, and you need to like maintain like feedback loops and make sure that you have the right people, because it can't just be your manager, it can't just be the people that report to you. There needs to be other people involved, and I think that this is especially crucial in getting different perspectives of leadership as well, because I think it is so homogenous, and that the only way of leading isn't the one way that we often see, that there are so many different ways. And like really leadership is like embracing what you're inherently bringing to the table and how you can personally empower. And there's no training class for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly.
It would be awesome if there could be, but
we'd all subscribe to that.
like a little magic wand.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. That's a great answer. Well, did you have any just like last minute like advice, or not last minute, parting advice? That's the term I wanted to say. for someone that's just starting out in the role in terms of like maybe what to focus on or what to look out for? Anything at all?
I
Yeah.
think I think a couple of things. So like I think for me, like the most pivotal, as we talked about, was like figuring out what my principles were and like really putting thought into like what good leadership looked like to me and who I wanted to be as a leader. And then mapping out what I needed to do to get there. That was the first thing. I think that communities of support are really important. Like that's one of the reasons why I love your channel, because you're giving space for like new managers to become leaders and to connect with each other and to like learn and grow. That's so crucial. And like having that connection and the support. And it doesn't just need to be like other managers. Like for me, like my mentors were crucial, my coaches were crucial, like having friends that were in the same role like was
Yes.
crucial, and like getting all of those different inputs, because like I call it your success squad, and there's so many different components and different things that people have to offer. Like your friend is going to be able to like listen to your rant and sympathize and be like, yeah, they're just stupid anyways. Whereas like your mentor is going to be able to give you maybe some practical advice, whereas like a coach is really going to be able to like dig into things with you. But then you can read a book to like think about a different approach or a different perspective. So there's so many different like inputs there. Um, and I guess that like that does lead to probably the third thing, which is like making sure that you're figuring out like who needs to be in your success squad, like what support is going to help me be really successful. So I'm not part of that 60%. Like I want to be part of the 40% that is successful, but then I want to be part of the 10 or 20% that continues growing in their career. If
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if that's what you actually want.
Right. For sure. But yeah.
Because not everyone does, and that's totally okay. But like if you are someone who wants to continue growing, but even if you don't want to like continue ascending the ladder, I totally get, but you still probably want to be a great manager. Like at the end of the day, know what you want people to say about you. What is your brand that you're building?
Mm,
And when someone works for you, they won't always like you. That's okay. Your job is not being liked, no matter what people tell you. I know like a lot of women are judged on being liked as managers, which is unfair and probably a whole other conversation for us.
yep.
But knowing what they want them to say. So like my teams, I know didn't always like me, but I think the vast majority would say that I was committed to them being successful and getting them the right things. And that was what I wanted for them. So figuring out what that thing is that like, if I call any of your team members, what are they going to say? You want them saying the same things.
I love that. And I love that you touched on the brand aspect of it too. You really have to be intentional about everything that you just said there. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's
It
awesome.
doesn't happen by accident.
No,
Like success is not accidental. Success is intentional. I mean, there's the odd person that like just, happens to figure it out all by chance, but that's rare. Most of us aren't that person.
yeah.
I know I'm not.
Me either. It took a lot of hard work.
Yes.
A lot of hard work, and I'm still working at it today. So I mean, like, yeah, I totally hear you. And I love that you just gave them like some actionable tips or actionable steps to take. I love that. So where can my audience learn more about you and connect with you, follow you, all that fun
Yeah.
stuff?
So the YouTubes,
Yeah,
I'm
that's right.
here. So Jennifer Brick is the channel. I also post every single day over on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/Jennifer Brick, I think is the link. I occasionally get on TikTok, not as consistently, but I'm definitely like YouTube and LinkedIn is like where you will find me on a very regular basis.
Your LinkedIn stuff is fire.
Thank
Fire.
you.
Like every time I scroll and I see a post from you, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be good. I like before I read.
Well, thank you for that.
All right. But you also have a brand new program that's coming out as well, right?
Yes, I'm
Please tell us
super
about that.
I'm super duper excited. So I am going to be launching soon my career glow up program. And I actually have a workshop called Glow Up Your Career that is going to be coming out soon. And then it's going to be available on demand if you don't make it to live. So got you covered. So if anyone is interested, it's glowupyourcareer.com if you want to join the workshop. And, at the end of it, I'll also tell you a little bit more about the actual program in case you're interested, but no pressure if you're not.
But you should be interested. I'm gonna just tell you that. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to leave the links for everything that you mentioned in the description box below so that people can find you super easy. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having me. This is so
Oh
much fun.
yeah, this was great. This is a great conversation. I feel like I got to know you better, even though we've been chatting. We were actually chatting for a couple hours before we did this recording, but within this like 10
Spoiler.
minutes, I feel like I learned so much. So,
Totally. Totally.
so thank you for taking the time. All right.
Awesome. Thank you.